We have in Shleima, either of Shmuel Malson, put in a lengthy shtickle from the Sharei Kedusha of Rav Chaim Vital, in which he talked about the importance of Midos Tovos and the fact that Midos Tovos are the container. See, it's a little misleading. The phrase is, the Midos are a levush for the Torah and the mitzvahs. Now, it's a little, that metaphor itself is not very clear. A levush means a garment. The midos are a garment for the Torah and the mitzvahs. So, that would mean if you don't have a garment, you still have yourself. But apparently, when he uses the word garment, he doesn't mean like a beged that you just put on, but he means it's like a bag or a container. Meaning, it's a type of thing where if you take off the levush, the contents spill. So without Midos Tovos, you don't have the container for your Tyra and your mitzvahs. And that's why the Arizal says, Rav Chaim Vital writes B'Shem the Ari, that the Midos Tovos are not really part of the Torah itself. They precede the Torah. They are like a foundation that is under the level of the building, because without the foundation, you don't have a building. The Tyra is the building. The Tyra is the binyan. The Tyra is the ladder, where you can use all sorts of mishalim. But without the Midos Tovos, there is nothing that's machzik the ladder. There is no foundation for the building. I mentioned the Brisker Rav's lashon. The Tyra was given to a human. The Tyra was not given to an animal. And without the Midos Tovos, a person is pashut an animal, and therefore it's not shaykh. Now that actually means that the relationship of Midos to Torah works in two directions. Without Midos Tovos, your Tyra and your mitzvahs are not going to connect you to Hashem. So I need the Midos Tovos to contain my Tyra and mitzvahs. That's one thing. But then, and that's what the Shar HaKedusha says, but then the Gra himself will say that the purpose of the Tyra and the mitzvahs is to break your Midos rows and give you Midos Tovos. Now, you see, that's moving in an opposite direction. Instead of saying the purpose of Midos Tovos is that I could do Torah and mitzvahs, right? That's one statement. The other statement is the purpose of Torah and mitzvahs is that I should have good Midos. But it's both. It's a simultaneous process. And that is, you need a foundation to be machzik the Torah mibifnim, and then the Kayach HaTorah will bring you to even a higher level. So today I want to, we're going to start Perek Aleph, and there are a lot of things in Perek Aleph that we will look at, but I want to start today something towards the end of the Perek, and then we'll go backwards a little bit. And this is Perek Aleph, if those of you that have a sefer, but I'll read it inside anyway. This is Siman or Sif Yud Aleph, Perek Aleph, Sif Yud Aleph, and this is going to be quite an amazing statement. I'll just tell you ahead of time that I occasionally have said this at mentors, missions, Shabbatons, or whatever it is, and the people have told me they didn't believe it. They didn't believe it was true. It couldn't have been true. I must have made it up or whatever. So now I'm going to cover myself and show you the exact makor for this. Okay, so here is what the Gra says. And I want to point out, again, even though the Even Shleima was not written by the Gra, but so it's not always an exact quote, but often the Mechaber does give you an exact quote. And some of this is mamish. Some of this in particular is an exact quote from the Gra. And he says the following: Inyan HaTorah L'Nefesh, Dugmas HaMotor Li'oretz. The relationship of Tyra to your nefesh, to your soul, parallels the relationship of rain to the soil. Right? Number one, we know Tyra is compared to water. And in particular, Tyra is compared to rain, not just general water, but specifically to rain. We see this in Parshas Hazinu when Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to Bnei Yisrael, giving them Tyra. Yarav kamotar likhi, may my teachings drip down like rain. Now, the pashtus, of course, is, if you would ask, why is Torah compared to rain? So the simple meaning is, well, rain is necessary for growth. Rain is necessary for life. Water generally goes from high to low, so the Torah leaves the arrogant and goes to the humble. The Torah is necessary for life. The Torah purifies, right? There are many, many reasons why Tyra is compared to water, right? We all know that. But here he's going to say a tremendous chiddush. The nature of rain, shematzmiach ma shenizra ba. Whatever is planted in the ground, the rain is going to cause to grow. Rain is indifferent whether it's something good in the ground or something bad in the ground. Let's say you have poison in the ground, poisonous weeds. The rain will bring out wheat seeds, if it's wheat, flowers, or poisons. It's matzmiach, right? It causes to grow what is ever in the ground. And that could be a sam chayim. That could be an elixir that gives life. O sam mavis, or that could be a poison. Tyra is like rain. Kain b'Tyra. Matzmiach ma shebalibai. Whatever is in your heart, the Tyra will accentuate. The Tyra will bring out. The Tyra will increase. But what will it increase? Whatever is in your lave, the Tyra will increase. So what does that mean? So the first half is simple enough. Im libai taif. If a person has a good heart, which means his midos are good, he has yiras Hashem, avas Hashem, chesed, avas Yisrael, then tagdil yirasai. The Torah will make him better, 100%. That's the idea, that the Torah will make you a better person because it will be matzmiach ma shebalibai. So that part is not controversial, that's straightforward. But the big chiddush is this. Im balibai shayresh paira reish velana. If in his heart, now shayresh paira reish velana is actually taken from the Tyra, right? In Parshas Vayelech, when Moshe Rabbeinu on the last day of his life is giving Musar to Bnei Yisrael, and he warns them, maybe there is in any of your heart a shayresh, a little root, paira that will be growing. Rosh velana are very bitter plants. In other words, a thought of apikorsis, a thought of kefira, so Moshe warns them that Hashem will punish you for it. So this is simply using the lashon of the pasuk. If in one's heart there's a paira, shayresh paira reish velana, yigdal hatina belibai. The negativity in his heart will be increased precisely through the learning of Tyra. Now, keep in mind that the Gra, the one thing the Gra could never be accused of is not being machshav the learning of Tyra. Right? The Gra learned for much of his life, as you know, 22 hours a day. And he slept only 2 hours, and never longer than a half an hour at a time. He slept 4 30-minute periods in a 24-hour period. Right? The Gra was machshav Tyra unashir. Right? The Gra was higisa b'yom and b'layla. In fact, they even have a ma'isa that the Gra very rarely left Vilna. Although in his younger years he went into Gullus, but after he came back in his 30s, he never left Vilna. But one time he went to a chasna, and he was staying overnight, and that was a big simcha. It was like a big celebrity. The Gadol Hador comes, so he had a room, like his room, and people would. There was a guy who had a ladder, and the room was on the second floor, and he would rent out a use of the ladder for per minute, that people could climb the ladder and watch the Gra sleeping. Like he would charge money. They could climb on the ladder and watch the Gra sleeping. So it's recorded that in one of these maisim, they saw the Gra sleeping, and then they saw him get up, and apparently he had slept 31 minutes. And he was crying, he was mitzayer. He said, I lost a minute of learning, How could I be in this city? This city takes away my learning, it takes away everything. And he was mamish b'tzar gomor. And it's brought down that the whole city was like Tisha B'Av. They all were tzebrachin, that they were mafsid the gra, a minute of learning. And when he left the city, he didn't come back for many, many years, but apparently 25 years later, he had to come back. And that time he only slept 29 minutes. So he said, Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was machshir the Aveda, and it mentions that city was Sahala v'Samecha. It was like Purim on that day that the Gra got back the 1 minute of the Aveda. So the Gra being machshir Tyra, what are you going to say, right? It's not, and yet, what is the Gra saying here? Look at this. Tyra, such a chiddush. Why is Tyra compared to rain? It's matzmiach, whatever is in you. If there is chesed and avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, the Torah is going to make it more. If chas v'shalom there's negativity, the Torah is going to make it worse. Now, the mentors from Lakewood could not believe the statement. They said it's not possible for the Gemara to say it, and in a way, it is a tzarichi in Lamaisa. It's not a davar pashut, but at least there's one way that one area where we can see this. I mean, Gaiva, I think, might be a good example of this. Let's say a person is super competitive. They have to be the best at everything, right? And if somebody is, beating them in something, they go crazy and they have to be miskaya, miskaber, minatseach. So the pshat is, they learn Tyra, that's just going to be another avenue where they bring out their competitiveness and their gaiva. Just another game in which they could play, and indeed the kayach of Tyra is a kayach that'll bring out the gaiva even worse. So what is the lesson here? So let's see the few rayas that the Gra brings. So the Gra, that's why the Gra is saying, without Tikkun HaMidas, see, this is more than the Shara Kedusha. The Shara Kedusha made the point, without Tikkun HaMidas, the Torah is not going to elevate you. Okay, because the Midas are a levush, which we're translating as not a garment, but as a container. The Midas are a container for your Torah and mitzvahs. But now the Gra is making a bigger chiddush than that the absence of good Midas, meaning you have Midas rise, the Tyra may make those Midas even worse, and that's the chiddush, a tremendous chiddush of Tyra nimshalas lamator or nimshalas lamayim. Now he brings a raya to this from a pasuk in Hosea, Kamo shekasov, tzadikim yelchu vam, upaishlim yikoshlu bam. This is a pasuk from the Navi Hosea. Actually, the first part of the pasuk says, "Ki yesharim." Okay, this is not quoted, but you need to know the words that are preceding this. Ki yesharim darchei Hashem. The ways of Hashem are yashar, are straight. Tzadikim yelchu bam. Tzadikim will walk in the ways of Hashem. Uposhim, and sinners, yikoshlu bam, will stumble. Now, if you think about it, there's something shver in that pasuk, and that is bishlama. If the pasuk would say tzadikim walk in the ways of Hashem, and rishayim don't walk in the ways of Hashem, that's very good. There are two roads, like the Torah itself describes it this way. There's a derech of life, of chayim, a derech of maves. The tzaddik chooses the path of life. The rasha chooses the path of death. That's fine. But the pasuk implies they're both walking on the way of Hashem. It says, the way of Hashem is yashar, the tzaddik walks on it, and the rasha stumbles on it. What is the on it? Stumbles in the way of Hashem, not that he's on another road. He's on the way of Hashem. What's the pshat? If he's on the way of Hashem, why is he stumbling? So how is the Gra Miyashiv? So he says like this. He explained that Yesharim, upright, straight, is a reference to Torah learning, because it says, Pikudei Hashem Yesharim Mesamchei Leiv. The mitzvahs of God are Yashar, Mesamchei Leiv, give you joy. In fact, that pasuk in Tehillim is why we don't learn Tyra on Tisha B'Av, because Mesamchei Leiv, and that's why you don't learn regular Tyra in the house of Benava. So the pasuk is talking about two people who are learning. One person has midos tovos, one person not. So the pshat is like this. Not only is the paisheya, not benefiting from the Torah, but yikashlu, the Torah itself, the derech Hashem, will be a stumbling block for him. He will stumble in the derech Hashem itself. Right, so that's raya number one. And then he brings a raya from Gemara in Shabbos, Uchamosha Amru, and which was similarly said in Masechah Shabbos, L'mayminim ba sama dechaya, v'lasma'ilim ba sama demusa. Actually, the Gemara in Sukkah, that's very similar. Ma'minim ba, okay, actually, even literally, these things are a little difficult to translate. Ma'minim ba are, well, literally it means those who put the Tyra to their right. It is an elixir, sama dechaya, an elixir, a drug that gives life. V'lamasme'ilim ba, and those who put the Tyra to the left, sama demusa, it's an elixir of death. Now, these are ambiguous expressions, actually. What does it mean to the right? What does it mean to the left? So here, the Gemara does not really explain it, but apparently the Gemara understands that when you put the Torah to the right, that means you're learning it with the right kavanos, with the right midos, the right hachana. So then the Torah is a source of life. Masme'ilim ba, when you put the Torah to the left, that means you're learning the Torah for gaiva, you're learning the Torah without midos tovos. So what does it say? It calls the Torah an elixir of death. And the Gemara in Sukkah has such a lashon as well, that Torah can become an elixir of death. Now, if you think about it, that's very schwer. I understand if I learn Torah with the wrong kavanos, it may not help me, I may not get a lot of schar, but elixir of death implies you're worse off by taking it. The Torah alone becomes poisonous. Again, the Graz you cite is because the Torah will be magdil your midas rise. Right, so those are the two rayas. Therefore, what is the practical lesson? Okay. Tzarech lefanais libay b'chol yom kaidem halimud v'acharav. You are obligated to spend some time before you learn and after you learn. Me ipush hadeyais v'hamidais, to purify yourself, me ipush, from the rotting, something rotting, of deyais, of different hashkafos or philosophies that are against Hashem, and midas, and the midas rice that are like weeds, because again, the analogy is weeds, because essentially these midas are like bad weeds, so the water is going to cause the weeds to grow even more. And you do this with yiras chet u'maisem tovim, by thinking about fear of God, yiras haraymimus, mainly awe and reverence and good deeds, v'zehu, which is how you're masakin midas, by acts of kindness, v'zehu mechuna b'shem beis hakisei. And that is an analogy, right? It's brought down, right? The Gemara in Brachos says a person should try to go to the Beis HaKisei at least twice a day, morning, night. So the Gemara says, of course, Ein HaMikri Yeshivat Pshutai, that's a health matter, that's true. But the Gemara is saying it's to get rid of the junk inside, in order that the limud of the Tyra will not be makalkal your midas in that way. And that's a remes to the Beis HaKisei. The alzer ramzu b'masha amru Beis HaKisei hadifa mikulu. If you remember, this Gemara in Brachos, David HaMelech says in Tehillim that one should always pray to Hashem that they will have something when they need it. Le'es mitzvah. And he doesn't say what it is. What are you praying to have when you need it? So the Gemara gives different things, and one of the things is there should be a Beis HaKisei, there should be a place, a bathroom when you need it, right? That's indeed a very important thing. And the Gemara's maskana is, of all of the different things that people are praying for, Beis HaKisei is the most important thing to pray for. Again, Pashat Pshat is Pashat Pshat, but the Gra is being Masber al Derech HaRemez, that the Beis HaKisei is the opportunity to purify yourself of psilas and bad Midas rice and the weeds, because after that, because without that, just like, again, the Dimion is very perfect, just as the accumulated waste in the body can have toxins and poison and all sorts of things, so too the Midas rice are a toxin and a poison that will be makalgil the entire organism. And that's why it says, Marich b'beis hakisei, there's even a shevach to take your time to be sure that you're thoroughly emptied. V'chein masha amru, hashkeim b'tzei, right, these are all the Beis HaKisei Gemaras. Hashkeim b'tzei, harev b'tzei. In the morning, go and then leave. And in the evening, go and then leave. Right, Shleima, and what is morning and evening? B'bacharuso, in your youth, uviziknuso, and in your old age. Right, so again, you see how derech agav, all of these Ramazim are being thrown in. That a statement that says, go to the bathroom in the morning and go to the bathroom at night, actually means you have to work on your midas when you're a young person in the morning of your life, and work on your midas even when you're old. Now that itself is an important idea, because sometimes people think, all right, when I'm young, I'm forming my character. Okay, I got to learn Musar, I got to work on Midas, but once I'm old, I've either worked on myself or lahepech, it's too late to do anything. And the answer is, it's never, number one, it's never too late, and number two, you've never transcended the need. There's no type of situation where a person is still struggling with Midas and one has to work on them and the like. Now, what does he say? Shelo tisrachek mibaracha merchak rav. You should never allow yourself to be distanced from Hashem and feel shlei tucha lahayel, that you're not able to improve yourself. Now, the interesting question is, so this is a gewaldige chiddush, that it's shayach and mitzias, that limud ha-Tyra will be makalkel a person. That's what he seems to say. Limud ha-Tyra will be makalkel a person. So, l'chayra, what does that mean? What does that mean practically? So let's assume a guy has bad midas. So, what's he supposed to do? Is he supposed to not learn? In other words, the Rebbe says, why didn't you come to Seder today? So he's going to say, well, I have bad midos, and they're bad. If I'd go to morning Seder, I'd be worse. Right? I'd be worse. Is that a taina? That's surely not a taina. The person is saying, I'm not going to learn, because if I learn, the midas are going to be makokal. It's very hard to know lamaisa what this eitzah is, because avada lahalacha lamaisa, and I'm sure the Gaon would say this too. We would say you got to learn anyway. And the emes says there are a lot of stiras here. There's a famous Talmud Yerushalmi that actually the Gra brings in several places. In Mishlei, in fact, I think it's even brought in the Even Shleima, in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is quoted as saying, Halvai oisi ozvu v'tayrasi shamaru. Halavai, that even if they left me, even if they rejected me, even if they don't even believe in me, they would keep on learning my Tyra. It would still be worthwhile. Shahama ohr shabah, because the light of the Tyra, machzirai lamutav, will bring a person back to Hashem. In fact, in some ways, this is the philosophy of the yeshiva world, right? A person, comes in, says he doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in the divinity of the Torah. So, but he wants to be in yeshiva, which is interesting. He still wants to be. He wants to explore things, which by itself is actually a maila already. So there are two ways of approaching it. One is, we're not going to open up a Gemara till we discuss that the proof of God and proof of Torah min hashamayim and proof of divinity, because after all, how can we learn the Torah until we are both in agreement that the Torah is from Hashem? So we're going to spend the first 6 months proving, or trying to prove Torah min hashamayim and all of that. That's one approach. One approach is we have to nail down the theological premises of everything, and only then we can go weiter. There is another approach that says, okay, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in Torah, okay, Beseder, but you are here. Let's just learn. Let's just learn. All right. I learn and I think, it's from Hashem. You think it's not from Hashem? Beseder. But just let's concentrate on understanding Shnayim Eichsim B'Talas and everything else. Well, the truth is, you might say this is a machlokus among yeshivas. Again, maybe I shouldn't get into this. Some say, again, I'm being stereotypical there. Some say, well, the Yeshivat Torah follows the first approach. We've got to have 6 months to prove to you that there's God. And Ohr Somayach follows the other approach. We're opening up a Gemara. In fact, I remember Rav Weinbach once told somebody, a person came to Rav Weinbach and said, I don't believe in God. So Rav Weinbach said, I don't really care as long as you go to morning Seder. Now, you could say that's flippant, but the profundity of that remark is that Rav Weinbach believed, and in some ways this is the hashkafa of the yeshiva, that there's a certain kayach of the Tyra to be meishech you to Hashem. So instead of saying, I need to know the Torah is from God before I learn, the mahalach is, the process of learning itself will bring you to Hashem. And that's based on the Yerushalmi, ha-ma'or sheba machzir l'mutav. They tell famous, I don't know if it's a famous story, but they tell the story, it may be a made-up story, but I think it's exemplary of a certain mahalach, that there were three Jewish philosophy students who were studying about religion and the like, and they had a whole bunch of questions about the existence of gods, and they didn't really know how to answer them. So they said, there's this world-famous yeshiva in Volozhin in Lithuania. So they sent one of their groups, says, you're going to go to yeshiva, you're going to get answers to all of your questions, then you'll come back and give us the answers to our questions. So the story goes that the guy went, and the guy was an atheist. He didn't even believe in God, but he had these questions, and he figured he'll go to yeshiva, get an answer to these questions, yes or no. And he's there for a year, and he comes back, and he's totally changed. And his 2 other friends are very eager. So, what's the answer? So he said, I don't remember what the question was. Meaning to say, it didn't make a difference anymore. Meaning, the Torah itself has its own momentum. I think we've seen this many, many times, that the kayach of limud haTorah is meishech a person to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if a person doesn't have the correct deis, the person does not have the correct beliefs, but it's miyasher the person, and that's why the things we learn may not have a direct connection, right? A person comes to Ohr Somayach, he wants to know about the nature of God, and he figures the Talmud will give him all of this information, and he's learning technical sugyas about modeh b'miktsas, kofer hakol, like, how is this answering my question? The answer is it isn't answering your question, but it's connecting you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, the question is this, based on that mahalach, how do you reconcile it with this teaching that if a person has, first of all, it mentions not only Midas rice, but it mentions Deis rice. Now it's interesting, okay, although maybe I have to focus a little bit on Deis. Now the Deis rice I translated, and I'm going to say now maybe I made a mistake, as wrong philosophies. In other words, Midas rice, Deis rice, the Torah's makalkel you if you haven't purified your Midas rice or your Deis rice. Now, if that's the case, then fakert, then hamor shaba machzir l'motiv doesn't work, because a person comes with krumkeit, then, he has these weeds that just grow bigger and bigger and bigger. So first of all, I just want to point out that the word deis may not mean wrong philosophies. Let me give you an example. In the Rambam himself, in the Mishna Tira, there is a section of the Mishna Tira that is called Hilchais Deis. Now, if you learn Hilchais Deis, you actually see it is not about opinions or philosophical positions. That's addressed in Yesodei Torah a little bit. But Deos are really personalities. So in a sense, Deis and Midas are kind of synonyms. They're not, right? So it's referring to personalities. And Hilchos Deos talks about, really, Musar, Midas, Tevos, Midas Rise, as well as some health advice as well. So based on that, one could for the following. One could say, Ein Achinami Hamor Sheba Machziru Lemutav is talking about a person who rejects Hashem, who doesn't believe in Hashem, who's an apikoros. So for him, it is possible that the koyach of the Tyra will be moshech him to Hashem because he's connecting to the light of God. But that which the Gra says that the learning of Tyra will make you worse, that's referring to Midas. In other words, there could be a nafkamina between krum philosophies, which the Tyra will straighten out, and bad Midas, which, God forbid, the Tyra will be makalkel. Now, the emes is, but even that is shver, because Lamaisa, we're still going to tell the guy with bad Midas to learn. In fact, this was a key point when Rabbi Yisrael Salanter started the Musar movement. Actually, what is the Musar movement is also not such a pashut. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter had a lot of different things. There was a Musar movement for Balabatim, working people. There was a Musar movement for Bnei Yeshiva. He had there was a Musar movement for Kira V'chaikim. He had many, many different agendas that he was working on. But people don't realize, although everyone today looks at Rabbi Yisrael as a great, great tzaddik, and he was right in everything, people don't realize the great opposition that did exist at the time. There were kama v'kama gedolim, and kal v'chaimer not gedolim, who were against a Musar movement. The Tnuas HaMusar, it's called in Hebrew, the Musar movement. There was a Rav Dov Katz, who wrote a history of the Musar movement called Tnuas HaMusar in 4 volumes. It's not so much an organized history, but mainly he goes through all the great Musar people, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the Alter of Slobodka, the Alter of Kelm, and he writes biographies of them with a lot of maisim. It's really a classic compendium of everything about all the Gedolei HaMusar. But there was a 5th volume that he published later that's called Pulmus HaMusar. Pulmus HaMusar means the machlokas against Musar. And he published it separately. It was not published as part of the set. And it's full of all sorts of denunciations and fighting and machos, protests and pashkavilim and even some violence. I'll tell you a story about it. And the Tnuas HaMusar, when I was in yeshiva, it's kind of out of print. I never see it around. But the Tnuas HaMusar when I was in yeshiva was, a sefer that many people had or used and enjoyed. But the Pulmus HaMusar you could never find. We had heard about it as a rumor, and we really wanted to see it because it was juicy. It had a lot of gossip and fighting, and as kids we wanted to get into that and see all of this machlokas. So finally, I think I located it somewhere. It was like a Xerox. It wasn't a printed copy, and read it, and it was full of all of this exciting lashon hara. It's not lashon hara, but it's all of these exciting stories. That in fact there was Reb Leib Chasman in Telz. The founder of the yeshiva in Telz in Europe was Rabbi Eliezer Gordon, who was a gadol mamish. And Rabbi Eliezer Gordon was very enthusiastic about the idea of Musar in the yeshiva. He said, Tikkun HaMidah is very, very important. So he hired Rabbi Yehuda Leib Chasman, who later became the mashgiach in Chevron, in Eretz Yisrael, but he hired him to be the mashgiach in Telz, about Musar, to give shmuzim. And the Yalter Bachrim in Telz, who were very chashuva, Abraham and Avrechem, they didn't like this idea that some guy, like a kindergarten teacher, is telling them, they got to not cut in line or whatever it is, Musar shmuzim and these inyanim. So in the middle of the Musar shmuz one night, they extinguished, this is before electricity, they extinguished all the lights, blew out all the candles, and they tied him up, and they put a sack over him, and they threw him out of the yeshiva. Like tarred and feathered type of thing. And Rabbi Eliezer Gordon was so furious, he wanted to close this yeshiva was his life, he wanted to close the whole yeshiva because of this. Now, think about how funny, not funny, well, it's tragic, but how ironic this story is. They say we don't need Musar. Therefore, we will tie you up and throw you out of the building. We don't need Musar. Well, that gufa is a raya how much they did need Musar. It reminds me, lahavdo, if I can give you a secular analogy, when the prior Pope, Pope Benedict, who died recently, at one point, he condemned Islamic extremism for being violent. He said, too many Muslims are violent. So there was a great riot that burned down a building to protest the statement that how dare you say we're violent, we're going to burn down your house because you said we're violent. I mean, that proves the contention. So what was the taina? What was the taina? I mean, who's against Musar? What? Musar says, work on your Midas. Grow in Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem. So what? I'm against that? The Chazon Ish was against Musar. What does that mean? Chazon Ish was against Midas Taivas? So you have to understand, the key issue is exactly this issue. Those who are misnageh to Musar said, yeah, Midas are of course important. But the best way to have Midas Tovas is Limud HaTorah. Limud HaTorah will make you good. Limud HaTorah will put you on the right derech. We don't need to introduce supplementary instruction. When you introduce supplementary instruction, the implication is that Torah is not good enough. And therefore they were misnageh, not to the goals of Musar, but they were misnageh to the notion of incorporating it as part of a formal curriculum, because they said the Tyra alone is going to purify you. Now, the Chafetz Chaim, who was not the first generation of Musar, he actually was much later, but the Chafetz Chaim gave the teretz to this idea. And the Chafetz Chaim said that Tyra is the diet for a healthy neshama. Your neshama is healthy, the Torah gives you all the nutrition that you need. But when a person is ill, a person has to take special medicines. So Memela, when you're a generation of sick souls, you sometimes have to augment Limud HaTorah with concentration on Musar. Now, the MS is, that's just another way to express what the Gra is saying. That if you're not menachesh, meaning if you don't weed out the Midas rice, the Torah could be makalkal. In fact, that might be what happened with the Avrechem or the Bachrim in Telz, right? And the like. That, but be it as it may, it became a very, very live. By the way, the Chazon Ish had other issues. In other words, one main issue about his snagdus to Musar was the idea of Hamor Shabar Machzir L'Mutav, the Torah itself will purify you. The Chazon Ish had other things which are a bit more subtle, actually very interesting, which are not nogeya to this. The Chazon Ish, number one, felt that for some people, again, this is a separate nekuda, not connected to this. For some people, Musar may develop obsessive-compulsive tendencies that take away their simcha in avodas Hashem. Again, this is a totally separate point. That is, the Chazon Ish felt that because Musar is so involved in scrutiny and cheshbon hanefesh, and always examining yourself over and over and over again, he was afraid it was not always matim for many personalities, because it could lead them to depression and could lead them to yish, right? Like every time you do anything, you do a mitzvah, say, did I have the right kavanah? And you think about, maybe I was davening along mincha because I wanted this guy to see me daven along mincha, or whatever it is. And the Chazon Ish felt it's actually better not to think about it too much. That fakert, I daven mincha, I should be happy that I daven mincha. I shouldn't be asking myself, what did I do wrong? So that was one issue that the Chazon Ish felt that for certain personalities, it might lead to depression. Now, interestingly enough, many of you know Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, the great Yeshivat of Torah V'das, who we're zochet to have here every summer. And he gives one of the largest shiurim in the world, online and Zoom, and whatever, over 1,000 people. And He once said that, I think it was Rav Pam, that Rav Pam told him he wasn't allowed to learn Mesilas Yesharim. I'm sure over the years he got to it eventually, but as a bacher, he was told not to learn Mesilas Yesharim because he would take it so seriously it would make him depressed. Meaning, for some of us, maybe this is tying on everyone else, I learn it doesn't bother me so much. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, so I learn it'll benefit me. But someone who takes it so seriously might get depressed, might get sabrachin, etc. And Rav Pam felt that that's such a hefsid that it's kedai to even deprive yourself of connecting to that because of the psychological effect it may have on you. So the Chazon Ish actually said that. And another thing the Chazon Ish said, which is very interesting, that he tined on some Musar, although wouldn't be all Musar, is that much of Musar draws on Yesodos that are not directly from Chazal. So for example, a lot of Musar may be based on psychological notions, psychology and the like, and therefore some of the makoros of character development are outside of the Messiah of Tyra, and therefore the Chazon Ish felt that also wasn't good, that you're bringing in outside ideas. Now I had mentioned, I think, that Rav Wolbe himself was a great Baal Musar, of course. Rav Wolbe had apprenticed during World War II. He was, Baruch Hashem, able to get out of, he was in Mir. I mean, he was German. He was a German citizen, but he was in Mir before World War II. But when the Nazis invaded Poland, he was able to get out, and he spent the war years in Switzerland, which was a neutral country. I never really understood why Hitler cared about that. Apparently, Swiss neutrality is like halacha l'Moshe Sinai. I mean, Hitler could have easily conquered Switzerland, but for some reason, you never touched Switzerland. So Rav Wolbe was safe during the war. In fact, it's interesting. He describes at one point that he felt he had Hashem all to himself, like he was in a place with like nobody else was there. He says, "I have HaKadosh Baruch Hu all to me." But at one point, he wanted to apprentice. He wanted to work for Jean Piaget, Piaget. Jean Piaget was a guy, but he was considered to be one of the most prominent child psychologists in the world. And since Rav Wolbe was interested in how you develop your Midas and how you develop personality, so Piaget's specialty is how did children develop a consciousness of right and wrong? Like, how do kids develop morality? And Rav Wolbe held that would help him in understanding Musar and Tikkun Hamidas and the like. So you see, they're beferish that he was going outside of Torah to take from the Goyim Chachma that would help him. And that could be good, that's Chachma b'Goyim Tamin, but the Chazon Ish didn't like it. The Chazon Ish did not like the fact. Right? So those are so kum techais that the Hisnagdus to Musar may have had three different elements. Element one, which was the Pulmus HaMusar. If you look at the Pulmus, and this is Kamat, the main thing that was mentioned, is Tyra will be Masakin your Midas. You don't need anything else. Right? That's Hamor Shabbat Machzira L'Mutav. The second Nakuda was for Yechidim, it may have a depressing effect on their personality. And the third Nakuda is that some aspects of Musar were drawn from Musagim outside of the Messiah of Tyra. And the Chazon Ish, of course, the Chazon Ish is much later. The Chazon Ish is way after. In fact, the Chazon Ish said, he said, I am against the Musar movement, but I'm against the Misnagdim of Musar even more. Because he said, he knew the Alter of Slobodka. He knew the great Bali Musar. And he says he was machshav them as Gedolim and Kedoshim, whose kavanah was pure. And he said, and those who fought against them were simply like hooligans. So he was not endorsing all of that. But he said, as an educational shita, he had chilukei deis as to what is the best chinuch. Now, Volozhin, which was still around when Rabbi Soslanter was doing his teaching, they were not a Musar yeshiva. They did not incorporate Musar. And in fact, I believe it's brought down, they didn't even learn Nefesh HaChaim in Volozhin. Nefesh HaChaim was written by Rav Chaim Volozhiner. He says, Nefesh HaChaim is Musar Sefer. We don't learn Musar in Volozhin. And Volozhin, as you know, closed down in the 1890s. The Russian government closed Volozhin down. And it's interesting that I believe the Brisker Rav said it was min hashamayim that Volozhin was closed down because they didn't have Musar, and therefore too many people. They were Elohim. Everybody in Volozhin was like a genius. But without that Yiras Shamayim, they went off in different Jerachim. There were many Apikorsim who came out of Volozhin, etc. Many Gedalim too. And he said maybe it was min hashamayim that the Messiah of Tyra should go to yeshivas that had Musar. Again, the Brisker Rav himself. See, the Brisker Rav was 12 years old because remember, the last Rosh Yeshivas of Volozhin were the Nitziv, who was Rosh Yeshiva for 50 years, and Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, who married the Nitziv's granddaughter, who was Rosh Yeshiva for 12 years. In other words, the last 12 years of Volozhin, you had both the Nitziv and Rav Chaim. And they had a fascinating mahalach. The Nitziv was the head Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Chaim was the junior Rosh Yeshiva, but they alternated shir. They didn't have two shiurim. They alternated shir, and each one had to continue where the other one left off. So like the Nitziv did it like Monday, I don't know b'diak, but it was alternate days, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Rav Chaim did it Sunday, Tuesday, etc. And they had to mamash, keep track, as it were. Now, sometimes the Rebbe feels bad if he gives a shir and people don't come, but I think to myself, Volozhin had attendance problems. Imagine you had the Nitziv and Rav Chaim giving shiurim. There were people who cut shir. They didn't go to shir. They wanted to learn b'chavrus. I don't want to go to shir. He fetches too much, whatever it would be. So some people are never happy. Now some people liked the Nitziv. They went to the Nitziv shiurim because the Nitziv's mahalach was more bekiistic. Right, the Nitziv would bring in. I mean, his Ian was bekias. By that I mean, it was an Ian shir. But when the Nitziv gave an Ian shir, it was primarily bringing makoros from all over the place. A Tosefta, Yerushalmi, a Medrash. Right, so the Nitziv was very, very heavy on bringing makoros from every aspect of the Torah because he knew everything. Rav Chaim did not bring in so many things. Rav Chaim would be ma'ayin in a svora, right? So there were people who loved the Nitziv's mahalach, and Rav Chaim was not to their liking, so they skipped Rav Chaim shiur. And then there were people who dafka loved Rav Chaim, and they didn't like the Nitziv shiur, right? So you can't win. So a Rebbe should never feel unhappy if people don't go, because you see there were Kama v'Kama, the greatest of the Rosh Yeshivas, sometimes didn't have people come to their shiurim. So when Volozhin was closed down, and of course this is a story in and of itself, why did the Russian government close down Volozhin? So the standard Makubal account was because the Russian government was demanding that they institute secular studies in the yeshiva. And the Nitziv decided better to close down the yeshiva and let them go to their own base medrash than to dilute the limudei kodesh of the yeshiva with limudei chom. Right? This is, again, there are alternative versions of the story. Maybe some other time I'll go into it, but this is at least the official Makubal version in the yeshiva world. So when Volozhin closed, Rav Chaim, the Brisker Rav Chaim's oldest son, Rav Yitzchak Soloveitchik, who was 12 years old. He was not yet bar mitzvah, and Rav Chaim went to Brisk, taking over from the Beis Halevi, his father, and eventually Rav Yitzchak Zev became the last Brisker Rav before the Holocaust. Right, that's the connection. But the Brisker Rav said that he understood that a yeshiva without Musar could be a very dangerous yeshiva, because you're producing brilliant people who are not necessarily working on their Midas and the like, and they can go off in dangerous ways. Again, that's miyusad on the gra. So the paradox I'm bringing out here is that on one hand, Volozhin did have this view that all you need is Tyra. On the other hand, that seems to be contradictory to the gra, that Tyra is compared to water, and indeed contradictory to Rav Chaim of Volozhin, in his own Volozhin yeshiva. But still, there was such a shita that was meruvach in Europe, and even Slobodka. Slobodka, the great Slobodka, which produced, I have a little bit of a negias to Slobodka because my Rebbeim were from Slobodka, but Slobodka was the great ground for the Gedolim that came to America, certainly. Rav Aaron Kotler, my Rosh Hashiva, Rav Yaakov Ruderman, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rav Yitzchak Kutner, the Sri Eish, Rav Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, all of these are from Slobodka. And Slobodka was a Musar yeshiva. The altar of Slobodka was a very important point. But people don't know, Slobodka was a breakaway. There was a yeshiva in Slobodka founded by Rav Yitzchak Ochanan. And when the altar wanted to introduce Musar, they didn't allow it. So he had to start his own yeshiva, Knesset Yisrael. And there were two yeshivas in Slobodka. One was a non-Musar yeshiva, one was a Musar yeshiva. The non-Musar yeshiva eventually moved to Kamenetz, and it became Rav Baruch Ber's yeshiva. But eventually they did Musar, so they became a Musar yeshiva too. But for many, many years, they Bedavka had a shita of not doing Musar. So
why did the switch?
Huh?
Why did the switch?
Which switch?
Why did that?
Rav Baruch Ber? Well, because Rav Baruch Ber himself understood because of the Chavetz Chaim, basically, and he understood that in this door there was a need for Musar because our neshamos were in a state of kilkel. But still, when all is said and done, I think we still have the dilemma. So I don't have bad midas. What's the pshat? I'm not supposed to learn. What's going on? So it's a bit of a tzorich. Meaning, I would have thought perhaps that if you have wrong hashkafas, the Torah will straighten you out. If you have bad midas, the Torah won't straighten you out. And yet there are many makairos that even bad midas, the Torah straightens you out. And that seems to be a contradiction to what the Gemara is saying here. So something to think about, mitzvah liyasha. Okay, I'll be well and have a good